Well, Adam, welcome back to Kicking Tables. It's such a pleasure having you return. I think you are our second guest to return in the same year that you were already on the show. So,
Yeah, you,
you
you
know,
barely made it.
just yeah,
Barely
you
made it. We're
just made it in time.
Yes, thank you for having me back.
So, of course, we had you originally for Fall of the Mountain King, and now you've got a new game, Power Plants. Tell us about it. What is Power Plants?
Yeah. So Power Plants is a 1 to 5 player game where players are playing as wizards, growing a shared garden, but you're not really growing it together in the sense of, hey, we all want this beautiful garden and we're all going to share it equally.
No, no,
You're
no.
still
There's no
trying to,
sharing.
yeah, right, exactly. You're taking over different patches on the garden. The garden is it's tiles that you're laying out, and so
Okay.
the garden grows as the game progresses and changes as the game progresses. And so you're playing over a series of turns, playing a tile out using the power of that tile, and then once the garden's completely grown out, then you're comparing and seeing who controls the most of different fields within that garden of like tiles touching each other, to gain gems and get the most gems at the end of the game.
So, what does a typical round of play look like? What are you doing on each of your turns to try to win the game?
Sure, it's really simple. Really, it is you have a tile and you play it out, and either you can use the sprout ability of the tile you're playing, and the sprout ability is a pretty powerful ability.
okay.
So it might be place 3 sprites out, or
Okay.
really it might be one of the powers is honey leaf. So it's place 2 sprites on every adjacent tile, right? Or you use the grow ability of all the tiles around the tile that you played out. So you sort of have that
Oh,
choice there of, I can use the one really powerful ability, or a lot of times you can get 2 or 3, maybe sometimes even up to 4 less powerful abilities, but you get to do a lot of them. And so, and those abilities again are place sprites out, which is how you're controlling that garden,
right.
or gain gems, or move tiles, or there's a wide variety of different abilities that come with those tiles. And so that's pretty much it. And after that, you
Okay.
draw another tile, and it goes to the next person. So it makes it really quick and snappy as far as gameplay goes. Especially like a 2 player game, it's 20 minutes. Unless
Okay.
somebody's really thinking things through. 20, 25 minutes. It's not very long.
Okay.
Awesome.
I'm curious with like your inspiration. Like the art to me really reminds me of like Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors.
Hmm.
That sort of visual. What was the inspiration behind making this into like the theme of the game being sort of plants?
Right. So when I submitted it to Kids Table, it was actually a slightly different theme, and so
Okay.
they came to us. So when I submitted it, it was you were you were an architect designing a building for a warlock. So you're just
Okay.
basically this idea of designing that building. And so when we submitted to Kids Table, like we talked about it up front, like, hey, we're going to have some type of magical theme on this. We don't know what it's going to be exactly yet. And so through further conversation with them, and then working with Pauline before, with her wonderful art that you mentioned,
Yeah.
Wow.
then the power plants came out of it. The idea of, oh, this is a garden and these are plants that we're growing, and it makes sense too with the whole sprout and grow thing of, you first place it down, you can get this special power, or you can grow it later on if it's already been done.
So it's interesting that very much like before for your other game, Fall of the Mountain King, it was in your mind it was a different game until you approached the publisher and they said, "Hey, let's fit it into this
This
theme."
theme. Yeah.
Right.
So how did that conversation? How did you approach Kids Table board gaming to get them to publish this? And what was that conversation like to say, "Hey, let's change the theme of this. We like it, but like, what was that conversation like?"
So I've found, so this will be my 4th professionally published game,
Hmm.
and 3 of the 4 the theme has changed, and actually all 4 technically, like, so I have a pyramid building game called Kuna that was originally set as an Egyptian pyramid and was changed to a Mayan pyramid. So still
Okay.
pyramids, but sort
Okay.
of different,
Sure.
right? But so what I found, at least with publishers, right, they're the ones that are really putting the risk out there
Yeah.
of what sells and what they need. And so coming in with this with power plants to Kids Table, I had designed it actually not from even a theme or a mechanic standpoint originally. I designed it
Gotcha.
from components. Like I
Right.
had extra components, and I thought, how can I use these components in a game? I was thinking about that, and so that's where it came up with. So I wasn't very attached necessarily to the theme coming into it with them, and so it was an upfront conversation, right? Like, hey, this is I usually name my prototypes right away, and I put some theme on them because theme helps no matter what in
Right.
Right.
pitching a game, and also in the design process. And so coming into it right away, it was hey, we don't know what theme it is. Are you okay with changing the theme? Was the question they asked, and yeah, we'll work through that, no problem. And they it's landed on a very fun theme of this garden building with some of these fun names, deep root and honeyleaf, and see these magical plants that are made up magical plants with some
Yeah.
great art to go with it.
Well, I'm curious, did you have the idea of the game first and say to them, hey, I've got a game, do you want to publish it? Or did they approach you and say, hey, we want you to make a new game? And then once you had a game, they said, hey, let's change the theme.
Right. So it's actually a funny story there, because you cut out just a slight bit, but I think what you're asking is, how do we connect in the first place, and then how do we get there? So Power Plants was I actually pitched Power Plants because it was ready before I pitched Fall of the Mountain King.
Okay.
Oh.
And so I come up with the idea for Power Plants. I play tested a whole lot. All right, it's ready to go. And I was pitching it to some companies. So I had never met Helena before, but I reached out to her via email and said, hey, I'm going to be at Origins. And so I think this was in Origins 2019. I'm going to be there. Could we meet? And so I met with her and Josh outside the main dealer hall on there was a table or a bar area or something. We we just sort of stood there and had the discussion. It was funny with this is that Helena was like stone faced. I thought, man, it's not connecting with her at all. And Josh though was like, I could see he was really getting into it and really liking it. And so I thought I feel like, I don't know how that went. But afterwards, maybe a week or so later, they emailed me back and said, hey, we loved it. We want to go forward with it. And
Awesome.
So I was really pumped because I've had a chance to play their Haunt the House is how I actually had their name had come to my mind, because I played Haunt the House the year before. And so I thought, that's a good company that this would work for, because it transitions well from whether you're playing with your game group, your serious game group, and using it as a filler or a maybe a way to end the night or something, versus with my kids, who I play tested it a lot with, So and so I thought, that would be a good company. So that's how that worked out. And then later on, I showed them Fall of the Mountain King once that one I felt was ready. And at that point, they said, well, let's do it, but can we switch it? Before, we were going to put Power Plants out first. Can we, because of the way our schedule's working out, can we switch it and use Fall of the Mountain King for Burnt Island first, and then delay Power Plants and have it come out now on Kickstarter? And so of course, I was fine with it. And so so that's how we ended up here. So it was actually the first game signed with them, but now it's the second one coming out.
Okay,
very cool. All right, I have a question. It may be a weird question at this point, but so there's a little bit of I guess some controversy on the BGG page, because you have a couple of different box art photos, and one of them says 1 to 5 players, some of them say 2 to 5 players. So I want to know, does it have a solo mode? And assuming that it does, based off of one of those boxes, how does that differ from the regular mode?
Right, it will have a solo mode. Yes,
it will. Okay.
And so it is. We're currently continuing to develop on that, and Josh has done a great job with that. I'm not a solo player, and so Josh has done the heavy lifting on the solo mode version of the game, and then I've play tested, of course, back with him and gave some feedback as well on that. And so the main difference is you're still playing against another player, so the rival that you're competing against, and it's almost like a program of how they play. So they draw a tile from the bag, and if this you place here, if this you place there, etc. And so that way they're competing over the same patches for you, and they'll get scores just like you'll get scores at the end of the game. And so at the end of the game, it's like a 2-player game essentially, where
Okay.
I scored 42 and the rival scored 40, I win.
Okay.
So
Right.
and so it's just sort of a programming, almost a simple programming program style, the way the rival chooses to make decisions based upon what's around the tile they just played, and even where they play the tiles.
Yeah, and it's nice because it's the same game, so you can use that to build strategies when you're playing your human opponents.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The big difference is, and within that game is with human opponents, your tiles are open, right? So you know that Sean will be able to play that deep route.
Yeah.
So I got to think about, well, if I do this, then that can happen. Versus the rival, you don't necessarily know that, which is a good thing to have. I think in a solo, you want some of that unknown in a solo player.
Some
game,
mystery, a little
Yeah.
mystery added in there.
So, is there a way to stop your opponents? Like, what is the sort of, how are you fighting against your opponent in the game? If it's if you're just
Sure.
laying tiles and doing an action, at what point can you actually, like, almost like a take that mechanic in the game?
Oh
Is
yeah,
there
no,
anything
there's
like
plenty.
that?
Oh yeah, there's plenty
Okay.
of that in the game. It is an aggressive. It is. I think it's a pretty aggressive game, or it can be, depending upon which tile powers you want to play with in the game, because there's lots of different powers. But some of the take that element, just the base element that's always going to be in any of the games, is only one color or only one person's sprite can be on a given patch on a single tile. So if Tycho already has one sprite on that, and I place one sprite on there, instead of placing my sprite, I remove Tycho's.
Okay.
And so it's a given push like that, and you're doing that because there's these fields. As the fields grow, they become worth more and more gems at the end of the game,
Okay.
which means you really want to control those, and you do that by controlling patches, though, not by just having the most sprites in the field. So if you have two patches and I have 2 patches, we're tied on the most patches controlled in that field. And then there's a number on each of the tiles, and whoever's on the lowest number is the one that wins the majority of the points there.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
So
I always love knowing, like you mentioned earlier, this was going to be a different kind of game. It was a similar play style, but what was that game? What did it look like before it was plants?
the really the big difference, and from a development standpoint, it's always been tiles. Before it was, like I said, it was instead of the garden, instead of having a honey leaf, you had a tower or a graveyard or something like that.
Oh, okay.
But from a design mechanic standpoint, the real big difference is that grow ability has always been in the game.
Right.
And through the development over the last 2.5 years, it's really been the sprout ability being added into the game to make it so, because before you would grow and you would trigger all the tiles around the tile you played, and you get a better ability if you played next to the same type of tile. Well, now that better ability is just on the tile itself for the sprout. So you sort of have that choice of, do I want the better ability or these smaller abilities around it? So that's the big change from what I submitted to Kids Table, and then what everybody's going to see on Kickstarter on Tuesday, and then on their tables hopefully next year when they're playing it.
Awesome.
Well, let's talk about your Kickstarter for a little bit. Do you have stretch goals planned out? Are they like quality improvements? Do you have different types of plants or expansions that you're looking at adding in?
Sure. So I can't say a whole lot because, again, it's Kids Table that is doing it. But one, if you've ever watched or followed any of Kids Table's Kickstarters, they do a great job and often have a lot of stretch goals. I will say that, so right now in the base game and everything that's been advertised, there's 8 tiles, and which is 8 different powers. You only ever play with 5 in a game. I will say that I submitted it with 16 different powers, and so I'm not saying for sure there'll be something extra, but there might be something extra depending upon how well that Kickstarter goes.
Okay.
With some of those extra powers that we submitted and have continued to develop over the past couple of years.
Awesome. Well, Adam, we're at that time of the show where we want to get to know you a little more than we did last time. So last time you were on, we had our lightning round. We asked you 8 really quick questions, and I've made sure that I'm going to ask you 8 different questions. So you ready to do this again?
Sure. Yeah,
Awesome.
let's do it.
Let's do it. What's your favorite classic game?
Classic game. If truly classic, I would say, does Acquire count as truly classic? I mean, it's 1960, right? So
That's classic.
That's
that
classic.
seems very classic to me.
All right.
So
What was
yeah,
the
I
name
would
of it
say
again?
Acquire.
Acquire.
Acquire, the Sid Saxon game,
Okay.
where you're getting stocks, and I think my
Oh,
version is hotels or businesses, and
that's
and laying tiles down to connect them together.
that
So
sounds like
yeah, it's
something that
great.
would have come out of the '60s.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
I have like the old 3M bookshelf, like really cool looking one.
nice, nice. Vampires or zombies?
I think I'll go vampires. I'm not a huge fan of either one. I do enjoy The Walking Dead, but less because of the zombies and more because it's just post-apocalyptic.
Sure.
Okay.
But I do love Stoker's, right? Yeah, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
I think
Awesome.
it's a great book.
All right. What game do you most want to add to your collection?
I've been really looking at, is it Arc Nova? It just released
Hmm.
at Essen, and it's a zoo game with a lot of cards. Seems right up
Okay.
my alley. It looks like a couple hours at least to play, if not more. So that one is really interesting me, but I might have to wait until next year before it's over here in the U.S.
Awesome. Okay. Deck builder or deck constructor?
I would say I love both, but right now, and I think we mentioned it last time, I'm really into Ash's Reborn, which is right behind me right
Okay.
now, and so that would be deck constructor. Just played in the tournament last Saturday, so
Nice.
I love that.
How did you do?
Oh, no, I'm not good at the game at all. I went 1-2, so I'm not good at the game at all, but I do enjoy
You
it.
had fun. That's the
Right.
important.
Oh, well, what's a game you love but always lose? Ashes Reborn?
Well, apparently, yes. Apparently, at least then. Actually, I just wrote a blog about all games I love to play with my wife, but she always beats me at. And a big one is Castles of Burgundy.
Okay.
She regularly beats me at that one, but it's a game we both really love.
All right. Marvel or DC?
I'm going to say Marvel. Actually, just yesterday. I took the day off work. My kids were on fall break, and they're just now to the age that they're old enough to enjoy Marvel, and so we sat down and started watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe with them yesterday for
Oh,
the first time.
Nice.
So it was a really fun day. They were pumped, and so even because of that, it's fun. So
Nice.
Marvel,
Yeah, for sure. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars. I honestly, and I know I shouldn't say this on a geeky show, right? But I don't think I've ever watched a full episode of Star Trek ever,
You're
not a
just
single time.
you're killing me, man. You're killing me. Just that
I'm,
knife right in the heart there.
I'm sorry, and I enjoy the newer Star Trek movies, which I think is probably not a good thing
No,
in the Star Trek
new ones are
world.
great. The new ones are great.
okay.
As a
Okay,
Star Trek fan, I thought the new ones are fantastic. And mostly because the way they wrote them, it was a new timeline, not a replacement.
okay,
Right? They actually
yeah,
the timeline changed because Spock came back and changed things.
right,
So it
right.
was, it can live at the same time as the
Hey,
original.
Sean, spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers from a movie that's now 12 years old.
Right.
Only 12 years old.
Yeah. I have one extra question I'm going to ask you actually, because I'm curious. It came to mind as we were talking. As a game developer, as you're looking at these new games that come out, and I like the one you're waiting for from Essen, are you constantly as a developer looking at like that's a really cool mechanic? How can I use that in a new game? Like, are you looking at games? Do you find you look at them differently than when before you were a developer?
Uh, Maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot. I mean, I'm a game player at heart,
Yeah.
and a game designer is just a thing that has come out of like this. That's just in addition in my hobby, right? Like it's
Right.
not something I do for a living or anything. And so, yes, sometimes if I'm actually playing a game, I'd be like, I would have done that a little bit differently. But
Sure.
most of the time, I do. Most of the time, I'm able to just play them and enjoy them, and not necessarily think about them from a design
That's
standpoint
cool.
of, oh, that's how we do it. Now, if I really like something, I would think, oh, could I use that in a different way? But it's not usually my first thought.
Right. That's fair. Awesome. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of our interview with you for Power Plants. What are your final thoughts on Power Plants? What do you want people to really know about this game, and why should they go ahead and back it?
Well, first off, the components are going to be awesome. They're nice, big, chunky tiles, plastic tiles that are very organic looking. So they're not just a straight edge tile. They have a nice curve to them. So they'll lock together nice. And from a, so it's going to be a beautiful production from that standpoint. And then from a design standpoint, or from an enjoyability standpoint, it is really a game that you can play with your game group or with your kids. Like I said, I did a lot of my play testing naturally just happens with my kids who are 8, 10, and 12 right now. So they're right at that age for that power plants game of where it's just play a tile and use the ability. And if you've played any of Kids Table's previous games, they always have a nice way to say, hey, this is a good way to play with your family, and this is a good way to play with more seasoned gamers. And so Power Plants has that too, where you just take out the grow abilities actually and only use the sprout ability. Hey, this tile does the same thing every time. You just play it down, and it makes it real simple. So that's why I think folks would be interested in checking it out, as it has some flexibility there of playing with your family, playing with your kids, and then just the wide variety. Like I said, I submitted it had 16 different powers. The base game has 8 different powers, but you only ever play with 5. So you get a lot of variety as from game to game.
There's room to grow, is what you're trying to say.
The room to grow, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Adam, it's been such a pleasure having you back on the show. Thanks for joining us again. Power Plants hits Kickstarter tomorrow on October 26th, or if you're watching it after that, it's there now. So everybody go check it out. The link is in the show notes below. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all. It's been great to be back on. Thanks for watching. Please check out the Power Plants Kickstarter, and don't forget to subscribe to OMG Nexus right down here below.